everybody! Welcome to our live episode of What's Up Doc? I hope you are there. Hindi tayo nagpasabi, no? But I hope you know that our live episode is back to its normal schedule of 6 to 7 o'clock in the evening here in the Philippines. Magandang hapon po sa lahat. If you are there, let me know. If you can hear me all right, kindly comment down in the comment section kung okay na po tayo. And we will start our topic for tonight. So today also is the International or World Mental Health Day. So we are concerned about our mental wellness. And so we will tackle about fears. Okay? So yung takot po usually ng mga tao when it comes to low carb and fasting, and of course, I will start with myself, yung mga kinakatakutan kumbaga ng lahat. And if you can find in-stream ads along the way, if you can just let it roll, okay lang po yan. Don't worry, live pa rin naman po tayo, magkakaroon lang ng few seconds delay, and if you have questions, we will still entertain that, basta't pasok sa ating topic ngayon. So, my topic for tonight is this, okay? So, my unfounded medical perspective fears before starting low carb and fasting. So, ano ba yung mga kinakatakutan mostly ng mga doctors or those in the medical field? Bakit hindi sila o ayaw nilang mag low carb and mag fasting? Okay? So, I cannot speak in their behalf as a disclaimer, but I will speak for myself. Kasi yung mga nakakatakutan mostly ng inyong mga healthcare providers, why they are discouraging you to start low carb, to start fasting, are also the same fears na pinag-isipan ko rin noon. Those fears is yun yung mga rason kung bakit hindi rin ako agad-agad nag-just jump into low carb and fasting without first doing my own research. And hopefully, masasagot natin lahat ng mga kinakatakutan, common na mga kinakatakutan ng mga tao. And also, it will address those unfounded nga, yung mga walang makatotohanan. Because, sa totoo lang, no, we have been somewhat brainwashed nga. At the top of our page, you can see there, we have been brainwashed na paniwalaan yung mga certain beliefs in nutrition that are not true. It does not hold any truth when it comes to science, when it comes to evolution, when it comes to totoong health natin. And so, importante that we tackle them one by one. So, nilista ko lang ito for your own sake. Maybe I'll post about it later para makita nyo, malista nyo. So, yung mga kinakatakutan mostly, baka maging malnourished ka kapag maglo-low carb ka at mag-fasting. O baka naman magka-hypoglycemia ka, bababa yung inyong blood sugar, mawawalan ka ng energy. At ito yung pinakauso among those who are against low carb, no? Mangangayayat ka, mawawala yung inyong muscle dyan. At kapag pinagpatuloyan mo yan, magiging lower yung metabolism. Meron pa akong narinig. Hindi yan maganda sa brain mo. Baka lumiit yung utak mo niyan. Okay? Hindi ka makapag-focus, hindi makapag-function. Also, meron na yung iba, contrary to hypoglycemia, sabi naman daw, mag-keto acidosis ka niyan, delikado yan. Yan yung parating kinakatakutan. Me, as a doctor, I only heard ketones when it is usually paired with keto acidosis. So, as I went back, nakita ko nga, kaya tayo takot na takot sa ketones or ketosis. Kasi in medical school, usually, nadidiscuss lang yung ketones when it is already as a sign of complication ng mga uncontrolled diabetics. So, ito ay usually DKA or diabetes ketoacidosis, simply ketoacidosis. Yung iba naman, sabi, magkakaroon daw tayo ng mineral deficiency and vitamins deficiency. Or, hindi kaya, loss of consciousness, hihimatayin ka niyan. Kita mo, kapag nag-skip ka ng isang meal, nanginginig ka na. How much more if you skip 2 meals, 3 meals, or 1 whole day na wala kang kinakain? Tapos, sabi nila, low carb and fasting, pinapababa yung insulin. At essential yung insulin sa katawan para mabuhay tayo. So, hindi pwedeng low carb and fasting. And lastly, ulcer formation. Magkaka-ulcer ka niyan. Sumasakit yung tiyan mo. Mabubutas yung tiyan mo kapag nag-low carb ka at nag-fasting ka. So, gano'n ito katotoo? We will tackle them one by one. But before we do, hello sa lahat. Of course, no? Busy-busy din si Doc Brian. I can relate po, Doc. I really plan to study today, pero sunod-sunod po yung patient, no? I was just listening to our review para makapag-study ng konti, pero grabe ka busy talaga. So, hello everybody. Hello sa lahat. Thank you so much for always tuning in. Present si Ma'am Evelyn. I hope to see you in our next masterclass. Yung fatty liver po natin magsa-start na this coming Sunday. So, break muna tayo 1 week ha sa masterclass natin, and we will have this Sunday to have our fatty liver masterclass. And if you are interested, sa mga hindi pa nakakasali, just click the one in the video to join so that ma-message po kayo ng mga admin natin, and just see the one in your message request para makita po ninyo. So, I'm glad that you like the topic. So, first, malnourished, no? Magiging malnourished daw tayo kapag naglo-low carb tayo at nagpa-fasting, especially with fasting. But, isa lang gusto kong i-emphasize dyan. Alam nyo ba na yung pinakamaraming rason kung bakit namamatay yung mga tao ngayon is not because of undernourishment. Okay? It's not because na wala na silang kinakain. By percentage, sobrang konti lang po yung namamatay pa because of undernourishment. At yun ay in very, very select distant areas, no, sa mundo. Okay? Of course, meron pa din. But the majority that occupies the large bulk ng mortality o rason ng kamatayan ng mga tao is actually because of the opposite. Overnutrition. Okay? And overnutrition is still malnutrition. At ito ay hindi sinasabi as overnutrition. Wala kang makikitang death certificate na nakasulat na cause of death as overnutrition. But they are seen as hypertension, diabetes, multi-organ failure, secondary to pneumonia, secondary to kidney failure, secondary to liver failure, secondary to cancer. Because inflammation, usually, mas lumalala po yan when we are overly stimulating our insulin in the body. So, insulin is a marker of fed state. Okay? So, with the biochemistry sa ating katawan, dalawa lang yan. Fasted state at fed state. Fasted state, yun yung state ng katawan mo kapag kumakain ka. And generally, that fasted state, meron yung insulin spike. Okay? And if depending on what you eat, yung level ng pag-spike ng insulin ay mag-iiba din. So, if you are chronically stimulating your insulin, panay taas po ng level ng insulin ninyo because you are following the small, frequent meals full of oatmeal, maya-maya tinapay, maya-maya kanin, and then later on apple, fruits, and then pagkagabi, kanin na naman with ulam. So those are actually too much stimulation of insulin. Add to that, especially sa mga elderly at yung mga bata, bedtime milk. Yung milk po, we will set another day about milk. Pag-uusapan natin yung gatas na talaga. But just know that milk is not essential. Kung calcium yung kailangan nyo, mas maraming other sources that are calcium rich. Okay? You don't need lactose. Okay? Lactose is the sugar in milk. Okay? Kapatid yan ni glucose at ni fructose. But we can live without lactose. In fact, yung mga taong lactose intolerant are lucky. Mas maswerte sila because they do not have the tolerance to take in lactose. And so, wala rin sila ng mga risk ng over-intake of those milk. Of course, iba if fermented milk products like yogurts and cheese. Fermented dairy products are different, especially when it is done right. I know maraming masaya sa inyo na cheese is a fermented and healthy source of calcium and a better option than milk. Pero, nasa caution list natin yan because not everybody can tolerate milk. Others are actually quite sensitive to milk and dairies, and ito ay nakakakos pa din ng inflammation. But more importantly, nasa caution list natin yan because sadly, especially dito sa Pilipinas, we do not have really good sources of cheeses. Okay? Konti lang. I'm happy na in our locality here in Bacolod, merong artisan na na gumagawa ng local cheese from Carabao milk, and those kind are really good, but the ones that we usually buy in the market, mostly mga processed cheese na yan, and hindi mo na alam kung anong nakalagay dyan, and that is already in our caution list because we wouldn't know for sure if it is safe. So malnutrition will never happen, okay, kapag nag-low carb and fasting ka, especially if you eat the right kind of foods. And actually, yung pinaka-importante dyan, when we do fasting, we have more chances of healing from overnutrition. Bakit tayo may taba? Bakit tayo may tumors? Bakit tayo merong mga kung ano-anong tumutubo sa ating katawan? It's actually stored energy. Okay? Those are the stored energy ng ating katawan in preparation sana if ever magkaroon ng panahon na wala tayong makain. Those are reserved energy in case merong bigla-biglang famine, in case biglang wala tayong makain. Those are the food that can let us survive. Yun yung basehan kung bakit we love fasting and we do fasting. Because we believe in evolutionary science, okay? And evolutionary science, yun po yung study in evolution na yung pinagbabasehan on why we do what we do, why we are who we are, and why we act and we have the instinct on so many things is based on our genetics as humans, as mga tao na nag-survive for the last 2 million years. And again, we emphasize that our survival for the last 2 million years, ito po ay ibang-iba sa kung anong nakasanayan natin with our modern times. Merong available food 24/7, merong refrigerator, merong instant cereals, merong instant noodles, lahat. Meron ng milk in bottles, you can have them any day. The fruits, especially the fruits are available all year round, and they are produced in hectares. Imagine mass production, sobrang dami ng fruits, and that is no longer not natural for us, because by natural, yung totoo, before, hindi naman tayo marunong magtanim. Agricultural revolution just started 10,000 years ago. Kung i-compare mo yan sa 2 million years ago, ay malayong malayo. Noon, nakakain tayo ng fruits, that is true. Without GMO, hindi pa sila na-alter yung kanilang texture, yung kanilang component, yung kanilang anatomy ng fruit, ibang-iba pa. And we only encounter them once in a while sa ating paglalakbay. And now, we are no longer traveling. Hindi na tayo naglalakbay on foot. So, wala na tayong ganong kagrabing physical activity. And most importantly, kahit nakaupo lang tayo, food just come to us. Okay? Nandyan lang. Whether prepare ng asawa ninyo, ng mama ninyo, o binili nyo sa stores. But still, it's available. Not the same way that was available before. Noon, yung fruits in season, walang kahit anong pesticides, walang kahit anong sprays or whatever, walang kahit anong fertilizers, and those that are available within the locality. Ngayon, galing sa Amerika, sa Australia, sa Mexico, at kung saan-saan pa. And now reaching our homes. So those are very unnatural, at yun po yung pinaka-rason kung bakit ngayon we are suffering from overnutrition. Sobra-sobra na yung mga kinakain natin, and that led us to malnourishment in the overnutrition side. And that's why when we do low carb and fasting, it is actually sending a signal sa ating katawan na hindi na harvest season. So it is time to burn those extra fats, burn those extra tumor, extra proteins na wala namang value sa ating katawan. Just that, they are excess energy, excess proteins. Excess lang sila na pwedeng-pwede nating magamit. And the best way to use them is for our day-to-day tasks. And nagagamit yan, magagamit lang yan once we lower down our insulin in the body. And we have two ways to lower down the insulin in our body. That is by fasting walang kinakain, and that is by low-carb meals. Because carbohydrate, yun yung pinaka number 1 na nakakapag-spike ng ating insulin. Okay? So, with low-carb meals, meaning rich in proteins, rich in healthy fats, and also rich in low-carb, high-fiber, vitamin-rich vegetables. Tulad ng green leafy vegetables. Those are low-carb carbs. Okay? So, kapag pinupuno natin yung ating plate ng ganon, we will avoid insulin spike. We will still have insulin increase from proteins, pero stable level. Hindi yung bigla-biglang na tumataas. Okay? So, that's why, crush out na natin. Well, meron ba tayong red pen dito? Nandito. Okay? So, crush out na natin. Okay? So, hindi totoo na merong malnourishment with low carb and fasting. Number 2, hypoglycemia. Okay? So, ano yung hypoglycemia? Hypoglycemia is yun yung pagbaba ng ating blood sugar below normal. So, below normal is below 70. But of course, hypoglycemia is the presence of low glucose plus symptoms of hypoglycemia. So, yung symptoms ng hypoglycemia, if nagsisimula pa lang kayo sa low carb, of course, you must have experience, no? Yung nanginginig, nagko-cold sweats, okay? Cold, clammy extremities, halos nahihilo, halos hihimatayin, tapos gutom na gutom. So, those are signs of hypoglycemia. Others, walang ganon. Alam nyo ba kung ano yung sign of hypoglycemia sa mga sugar dependents? Umiinit yung ulo. So, yun. Kapag nakita nyo, meron kayong mahal sa buhay na feeling nyo over time, mas nagiging mas moody, okay? Grabe yung mood swings. Try to look at their food intake. Baka nasusobrahan na sila sa carbs and they're already on sugar withdrawal. Every 2 to 3 hours, nagsa-sugar withdrawal na naman sila. And that is because of the sugar roller coaster na we discussed the previous week. Okay? Lang Friday ba yon? I think we discussed about the sugar roller coaster. So, yun yung idea dyan. At bakit ka hindi magkakaroon ng hypoglycemia with low carb and fasting? It is because, okay? It is because your body can actually make its own glucose. Kayang-kayang gumawa ng sariling glucose ng inyong liver, okay? And to some extent, kidneys, okay? When you are fasting for so long, okay? Kaya niya itong gumawa ng kanyang sariling glucose. This is de novo glucose formation or ang paggawa ng sarili niyang glucose gamit ang mga recipe na hindi kakailanganing galing sa carbohydrates mismo. Okay? So, those are glucogenic amino acids. So, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. So, kapag yung proteins naging na parang Lego, ito yung magandang explanation doon ni Dr. Jason Fong, it's like, for example, yung tumor mo sa katawan, okay? Yung tumor mo sa katawan, so, naka-shape siya into a ball of tumor, no? It's made up of Lego parts na made of amino acids. And then, when that broken down, so, masisira na. So, maliliit na components na lang siya ng Lego blocks. And that can serve as your amino acids. And then, the glucogenic na amino acids yan, kukunin ng inyong liver and it will gagawin ulit into glucose. Okay? Diba? Sobrang ganda. So, those are the normal process ng ating katawan and it will be activated, okay, together with ketone formation. So, meron din pong tinatawag nating ketogenic amino acid. So, yung protein actually is very flexible. Pwedeng maging muscles as a protein storage. And pwede rin siyang maging ketones from the ketogenic amino acids. And then, meron ding glucogenic amino acids. So, yun naman yung pwede mako-convert into glucose. Kasi, yung katawan natin, it has to maintain a steady state level of 70 to 100 on fasting na blood sugar level. Okay? Magkakaroon lang ng hypoglycemia if meron kayong condition leading to hypoglycemia. So, very rare is hyperinsulinism. For example, meron kayong tumor na nagpro-produce ng insulin. Yun lang talaga yung pinoproduce niya. Insulin lang na insulin. And that is very, very rare. So far, wala pa akong nakita niyan in person. Merong isa na misdiagnosed. Akala nila meron siyang ganan, insulinoma. But when I look at the history again, I doubted it na it was insulinoma. She was actually misdiagnosed as insulinoma and diabetic, no? Pero hindi talaga. When the moment we removed her carbohydrates and we tapered down her dosage sa kanyang gamot, it became normal at hindi na siya nagkaroon ng hypoglycemic episodes because your body is so intelligent, okay? Sobrang galing ng katawan natin that it knows how to balance things out. Alam niya na kayang-kaya niyang gumawa ng kanyang sariling glucose as long as it needs glucose. And one thing that is good, kasi yung sinasabi ng iba, for me also, no, as a doctor, so, all of this, disclaimer hindi ko sinasabi na ito yung kinakatakutan ng doktor nyo, but ito yung kinakatakutan ko as a doctor noon. Okay? That I have to confirm first before I go into low carb and fasting. So, yung isang nakakatakot dyan is yung idea na baka wala na akong magamit sa aking utak, okay? Baka hindi na ako magiging ganon ka-sharp, or I will tend to forget things, or I will tend to be less focused, more distracted kapag wala ng glucose yung brain natin. And that is not true because our body pala, the moment it is already fat adapted, kapag nasanay na siya na yung ginagamit niyang energy is coming from ketones and fats, yung brain kayang-kaya mag-function up to 75% na yung fuel niya ay galing sa ketones at hindi galing sa glucose. So, that's why all the more that your liver will not work so hard just to produce glucose. Kasi konti na lang yung kailanganin niyang i-produce for that 25% of our brain use. And the rest of our body, our muscles, our fat cells, our kidneys, our organs, they are capable of metabolizing o gagamitin nila yung ketones or yung energy coming from fats. It is called ketones. It is being used as energy. Kayang-kaya nilang mag-adjust na yung ketones nila, yung ketones ay yun na yung energy source nila. So, you can see that our liver will no longer need to work so hard. Okay? Kasi this time, konti na lang yung susuplayan niyang glucose when you are already fat adapted. So, hypoglycemia only happens in very rare tumor, that is insulinoma tumors, and of course, sa mga taong nagtuturok ng insulin o umiinom ng mga gamot na nagpapababa ng blood sugar. That's why ayaw namin na basta-basta lang kayong magsimula ng inyong low carb and fasting na hindi po sapat yung inyong alam. Okay? It's good to educate yourself more, of course. Pwede nyo pong i-educate yung self niyo through proper research and all of the books na available. Meron tayong Diabetes Code ni Dr. Jason Fong. And also, we have coaches and we have doctors available din to guide you. Kasi it's your health that's at risk. At ayaw nating ilagay nyo sa panganib yung sarili ninyo at bigla-bigla na lang, like some of our patient, nagpakonsulta after na nilang ma-emergency room kasi nga sila lang gumawa and not properly guided. And so that is not what we are promoting here. When you do it, at least you do it with guidance, with proper guidance. Okay? And if you want to understand more about it, mas mabuti if you will have a structured learning, okay? And we invite you to join our Diabetes Masterclass. It's open anytime, 21 days, 20 minutes video per day. 20 minutes lang, and so hindi kayo mag-info overload. You can absorb it slowly and appropriately. You can apply the concept behind why we do what we do, and you can appreciate why we shouldn't be afraid of hypoglycemia as long as you are doing it right. Okay? So, hypoglycemia is no longer a fear. So, hindi na tayo matatakot sa hypoglycemia. Next, no energy. So, no energy, isipin nyo, if you are fueling on glucose, if hindi pa kayo fat adapted, para kayong naka-fuel sa battery. Okay? Yung battery, from time to time, kailangan palitan. Kasi wala kang enough storage ng energy. Sa battery ka, kaunti lang yon. But, if you are fat adapted, okay? If you are fat adapted and you are fueling on ketones, alam nyo ba kung ano yung katumbas nito? Para kayong merong direct supply. Para kayong naka-plug in. And much more important, para kayong merong backup generator. This is because the fats in our body, lahat ng yan, those are stored energy. And hindi yan magagamit as long as you are having insulin spike. Sobrang taas ng insulin because insulin is a fat burning blocker. Binablock niya yung fat burning phase ng ating katawan. Hindi nyo kailangan pagalitan si insulin. Yun lang talaga yung ginagawa niya. What you need to do is to make sure that you are not eating foods that are triggering more insulin release. At ano yon? Biscuits, candy, okay? Desserts, soft drinks, milk tea, fraps, ano pa ba? Iced coffee. Yung iced coffee ngayon, hindi na totoong iced coffee, milk and sugar na. Tinapay, pandesal, kanin, to some extent, patatas. Okay? Alam ko, maraming matatawa dyan kapag magsasabi akong Mr. Patatas. Kayo talaga, huwag kayong ganyan. Okay? We also have, what else? Oatmeal, na akala nating sobrang healthy. So, those carbohydrate-rich foods will trigger insulin increase. And as long as nandyan yung insulin, hindi matatap yung inyong nakatagong energy sa katawan because it's there, gonna block it. It's gonna block it. Okay? So, importante, alam natin yan. And the moment na wala na nagbablock, your body can just naturally use up those energy. So, kung ang isang tao na nagmamarathon, na glucose dependent, after 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers, magre-refuel na yan. And every 2-3 kilometers, iinom na naman yan ng mga energy bars, energy drinks, sugar-loaded na supplements para lang masustain. But when a low-carb and fasting advocate and fat-adapted person nagmamarathon, they will only need to refuel with water, with electrolytes, but no need for extra energy because their body will be starting to get fats coming from their own body. So, yun yung halaga kung bakit parang halos naka-direct current ka, nakasaksak ka mismo, diretso sa plug and not on battery, and meron ka pang generator because glycogen is the storage form of glucose. Kapag tumatakbo, kaya sila nagka-carbo load para meron silang storage na glycogen sa kanilang liver. Glycogen is just maximum 2,000 kilocalories lang yan. Pero an average person, kahit hindi mataba, average person lang, okay? May BMI na perfect at 22 to 23, meron silang fat stores na equivalent to 165,000 kilocalories of energy. Ganun po karami yung fat stores natin. So, yun ang amazing because hindi ka, sa totoo lang, if you will do it right, hindi totoo na mawawalan ka ng energy. Okay? So, quick fact, ano ng oras ngayon? 6:30 kahapon, last meal intake ko and last water intake ko was 3:30 in the afternoon. So, actually, I'm already on my 27th hour of fasting. So, feeling nyo ba kinukulang ako ng energy ngayon? So, that's 26 hours of fasting, 27 hours of fasting, and we don't plan on breaking our fast kasi nga, nasa ano tayo ngayon. We are now on our DCR protocol, dry fasting, clean fasting, and refeeding protocol. And we will still eat tomorrow. Okay? So, moving on, another day, another time na natin pag-usapan yan, muscle wasting. Okay? Mangangayayat daw kayo if you will do low carb and fasting. Okay? This is not true if you are doing it right. If you are losing muscles, okay? Hindi yan totoo. That is definitely not true. In fact, when we did our DCR protocol, when we did a cycle of 1 day dry fast, 2nd day clean fast, and 3rd day refeed for a cycle of 7 cycles last month, we preserved our muscle mass and I even gained muscles. So, yes, I have muscles now. Hindi na ako ganun ka-soft, kumbaga. I'm a little more bulkier than usual because we intended to really preserve our muscles and make sure na hindi ito mawawala. If you happen to be losing muscles, then you must be doing something that is not very, very good when it comes to low carb. And that is eating less proteins and maybe too much fats, and also yung low carb nyo is good, you are doing low carb right, but you are losing or eating very low proteins, and maybe you are overdoing your fats. Okay, so when you are doing this, overdoing your fats, very little proteins and very little carbs, you will go into possible muscle wasting, especially if you've already maximized autophagy. Okay, so autophagy is the process kung saan na yung ating katawan ay kinakain niya yung kanyang sariling katawan, but only the parts that are not necessary, like the tumors and all of those na mga sabi nating mga build up kumbaga. And for example, na-maximize nyo na yung inyong mga tumors dyan at kung ano-ano yung protein build up dyan. So, your body will need more glucose, okay? Para glucose ingredients. It can also come from your triglycerides, from the fats. Yung triglycerides, it has a glycerol backbone. So, that glycerol, pwede siyang maigamit para gawing glucose, okay? But in the end, hindi siya magiging very enough if you are, especially if you are physically active. So when you are physically active, and kahit sedentary ha, but the fact that you're moving, that you're working, kahit household chores lang, that can already lead to muscle wasting, especially sa ating mga very fit na mga kalalakihan and ang mga mommies and tita natin dyan. So, sabi ni Doc Brian, true, done half marathon in fasted state, finished it in 2 hours and 6 minutes. Oh, grabe. Half marathon is 25 ba, Doc? Tama ba? 25 kilometers yung half marathon? Tama ba yun? So, sobra. So, that's Doc Brian is a pediatrician and a triathlete. So, kung ayaw nyo maniwala sa akin, okay lang. Maniwala kayo kay Doc Brian who has done it. Because ako, yung pinakamatagal ko. Wala pang marathon lately eh. Wala pa. We are planning to join if ever meron this coming months. But right now, wala lang muna. 5 kilometer. Or at least a whole day. Or at least 2 weeks of fasting. Yun lang yung na-experience ko without much activities. Because when you do fasting, it's best to do it rested. For overall healing, kumbaga. Okay? But muscle wasting will not happen. Wait, what's time? Okay, 6:34 ang ating time. Gusto ko lang i-emphasize, especially for those who are diabetics, who are insulin dependent. When you do low carb, okay, but you are still injecting your insulin, because yun nga, you are still afraid to remove your insulin and your sugar, at dahil hindi kayo makakakommit sa full low carb, you still eat carbs from time to time. That is what is risking you into muscle wasting. It's because as long as nagtuturo kayo ng insulin on a day-to-day basis, that is fat burning. So, that is blocking the fat burning. Okay? Insulin blocks fat burning. When you do low carb, you naturally lower your body's insulin secretion. But, kahit naka-low carb ka, but you are injecting exogenous insulin, then you are still putting insulin in your body that stops fat burning. And we see this with patients who are doing low carb on their own. Hindi nagpapacheck, hindi nagpapakonsulta, hindi nagpapaguide, because yun nga, gusto nila magtipid, gusto nilang sarilihin lang nila. They don't want to spend to be guided, but they'd rather choose to spend for medicines na sa totoo lang could be not needed. Okay? Posibleng hindi na kailangan. But since they are doing it on their own, so sa kanila na yon, and what we see is them losing weight at first, and then eventually hindi na nag-lose. And the saddest part there, yung nawala sa kanila, is actually not the fats, but it's the muscle. Kaya sila nangangayayat, weak, not so active. Okay? And kung meron man silang intermittent fasting, somewhat that can activate ketosis. But if you are still high on insulin, you are still not going to be fat adapted. Kasi your body will still strive to function using glucose only. So, after niyang kunin or kainin lahat ng extra protein sa katawan, it can go after your muscles. Your muscles, and that can lead into muscle wasting, and loss of muscle mass is also not good. That is linked to low tolerance, low immunity especially in combating infections. So we really need to preserve our muscle mass. Okay? So importante, when we preserve our muscles, there is enough sustenance for the muscles, that is intake of good amount of proteins. Okay? And also, merong motivation ang katawan nyo to hold on to those muscles. So ano yung motivation na yon? Use your muscles, move more, either exercise more or just do more, or dance more, TikTok more, or whatever can get you into moving. Okay? Yun yung importante. Next would be lowered metabolism. Okay? So, lowered metabolism, sabi nila, yun daw mangyayari, you will disrupt your metabolism when it comes to low carb and intermittent fasting. And so far, yung studies ngayon showing otherwise. In fact, there is improvement in metabolism when it comes to low carb. For me, before, I was very, very low in metabolism. Ngayon, noon, hindi ko maalala kung kailan ako last nag-cut ng aking nails before. It can grow again. At ngayon, sobrang dirty, oh. Ang haba-haba na naman. Parang last week lang ako nag-cut ng aking nails. So, sorry, hindi ko kasi makita yung nail cutter dito eh. But magka-cut ako ng nails ko mamaya. But the point is, metabolism will not be disrupted. In fact, it will even be increased, no? There is what we considered as boost in metabolism. Tataas yung growth hormone, especially when you are doing it right and you refeed with proper food. Yung pinakamasama dito, when you do intermittent fasting, tapos kapag kain kayo, high carb, low protein, high fat. Those are the worst combination. Okay? So, yung gusto natin, low carb, high proteins, and high fat. And ang high fat po natin, huwag kayong ma-excite masyado na baka akalain yung unlimited fats. Hindi po. High fat could just mean 1 avocado, 3 egg yolk, at saka ginamitan nyo ng coconut oil sa pagluto or butter. That's already high fat. Okay? Kung kakain pa kayo ng chicharon and pork belly after that at bacon pa, then that is already too much fats. Okay? So, we just want to make sure that you are eating just enough fats and increase more on your proteins, and make sure that you are eating low carb meals. And with low carb, properly done low carb and properly done fasting, especially yung kinakain nyo when you break your fast are the good ones, it will not lower your metabolism. In fact, no, tumataas yung growth hormone natin, and growth hormone is an indicator of a good metabolism. And as for myself, my bowel movement improved. Okay? So, other course, kung nagko-course yung skin, so far, hindi naman nagda-dry yung skin ko. Before, hindi ko kayang lumabas ng kwarto after taking a bath without lotion, without moisturizer. Kasi feeling ko sobrang gaspang or sobrang dry ng skin ko after taking a bath. But now, wala. Marami lang, may mga times na hindi na ako nakakapag-lotion because I feel hydrated, na okay lang yung skin ko. And so far, sobrang tagal maubos ng lotion ngayon sa bahay because I no longer feel the need to moisturize every now and then. Ganon. So, those are signs of good metabolism. So, my fear of lowered metabolism is actually still unfounded. And, bad for the brain ba? Bad for the brain? Of course, if you will still if you do fasting but you eat carbs, no? That is bad for the brain because as what our previous episode last week ba yun? Yung effect on mood, yun pala sana yung episode natin yan because today is the World Mental Health Awareness Day, no? Pero anyway, what is bad for our brain is sugar addiction and carb addiction. And eventually, kapag nagkaroon na tayo ng type 3 diabetes in the form of Alzheimer's disease, okay, yun ay magkakaroon ng shrinkage. Nag-shrink talaga yung brain. Okay? It's mostly eating up itself. It's eating up its own self. Okay? Because hindi na nga siya nag-accept ng glucose eventually because of parang diabetes na hindi niya na kayang i-metabolize. Okay? So, what happens in the brain ng isang Alzheimer's, actually maraming metabolic problems yung Alzheimer's disease na kung bibigyan nyo nga daw ng gamot per super abnormality in Alzheimer's, parang kakailanganin mo ng 100 to 200 different kinds of medicine para lang ma-combat yung Alzheimer's, kasi may problema sa mitochondria, may problema sa peroxisome, may problema sa reticular network, lahat na lang ng parts ng brain cells, okay, may problema. But if we prevent, and good news with Alzheimer's disease, supplementation with MCT oil and coconut oil are also found to improve brain health, especially kapag wala itong pinagsasabay na carbs, because your brain can still function using ketones. Unti-unti, you can introduce ketones as a source of energy para hindi na ito maging super dependent on glucose. So, as for myself, alam ko na hindi yon makaka-apekto ng aking brain. In fact, when I study, when I prepare for a very important exam, and when I review, na contrary to many people na hindi makapag-aral kung walang pagkain, I feel like I can learn more kung wala akong kinakain. Bakit? Because the blood flow will just go into my brain at hindi pupunta sa aking tiyan. Because if you are always eating, majority of your blood flow will go to your stomach. That's why after nyong kumain, especially with low carb, gusto nyong matulog. Parating pagod na, ayoko na, tapos na ang aking araw, magpapahinga na ako. But when you are fueling on ketones and you are also consuming the right foods and you have the right mindset, of course, you can go on and on. And as you all know, the books that I wrote, and good news, dumating na pala yung books namin, kaya lang mostly book 3 pa and kakaunting book 1 and book 2. So for those na hindi pa naka-read ng books, it's now available again. And so those books were written on a fasted state. Okay? So, yun. And even now, I'm on a fasted state. So, it's not good. It's not true that it's bad for our brain. In fact, it can be one thing that can improve your brain function. If you feel na, if naka-high carb ka ngayon, and you feel that you are doing good already, who knows, baka kapag nag-low carb ka and you become fat adapted, hindi mo lang alam, baka genius ka pala, akala mo above average ka lang. Okay? So, yan. Amazing yung nagagawa. In fact, may mga anecdotal stories when people nasa kulungan for the prisoners of war during mga olden times when marami yung na mga prisoners of war. So, they are of different race, mga iba-iba sila. This one occurring outside Philippines, So, kapag hindi sila pinapakain, maraming panahon na wala silang kinakain. So, they were fasting. Of course, that was starvation kasi nga hindi nila nakokontrol. So, yung iba who are not mentally fit, yung iba nga nababaliw. Because starvation is different from fasting. Starvation, you are not in control. But if you are in the right mindset like Gandhi, like Buddha, and you can tune in to your own self and you can maximize the effect of time na wala kang kinakain, you can actually go beyond your current capacity. At nakita nila doon na those prisoners of war were able to learn the language nung kasamahan nila, nung mga kakosa nila. They were able to learn the language in just a short amount of time. That is how amazing our brain is. And by evolution again, it has a survival value. Because that survival value, kasi kapag nagpa-petiks-petiks ka dyan and you are just not thinking anymore, it's not going to help you survive. But if you are hungry at wala ka nang kinakain, all the more that you need to stay sharp and focus kasi kakailanganin mo yon to hunt successfully. Okay? So, yun yung value why we become sharper when we are not eating. Okay? When we are fasting. Or when we are, biochemically speaking, when we are fueling from ketones. Okay? Kasi pareho lang somewhat yung fasting and low carb na nagagawa sa brain natin when it comes to fuel. Okay? So, when you are fueling on ketones, you are activating that. For others na hindi alam yan, they might feel na hindi siya sharpness in thinking, but they become more critical. So, mas naging stricto, yung iba mas naging mainitin yung ulo, and of course, we don't want that. That's why yung book 3 natin is about wellness and acknowledging that stress can still give us that same problem sa ating metabolism, sa ating health, similar to what eating high carb food is. Okay? So hindi lang tayo just after the what we eat or when we eat, but also what kind of stress we allow our body to have. Okay? Para holistic tayong lahat. Okay? And moving on, malapit tayong time, ketoacidosis. So ketoacidosis, simplihan lang natin. Okay? Ketoacidosis is too much acidity in your blood because of ketones or keto acids. Okay? And also elevated sugar or glucose. So, too much glucose and too much ketones will lead into ketoacidosis. Yun po yung delikado. Okay? So, pero, yung importante dito, with low carb and fasting, you actually don't have high glucose, but only high ketones. And that is nutritional ketosis, as what discussed by Doc Brian in our low carb con. So, low carb con 2021. Sino yung nag-birthday? Merong magpapa-shoutout. Birthday daw niya. Si Ethel Alon ba yun? Happy birthday! Happy birthday po! I want to dance kasi both feet are lefties. Oh, masasana yan, Doc. And yes, no, yun talaga. Importante, we know what we can do and the things that we can do sustainably. Okay? Kasi kahit gano'n pa nila kasabi na kailangan mo mag-lift ng weights, no, para maging healthy ka, pero kung hindi mo kaya yan, hindi mo talaga magagawa yan sustainably, so it will really not work for you. Okay? So, kailangan you can find some degree of activity and of course, no, na kaya nyong ipagpatuloy. So, ketoacidosis is different from nutritional ketosis. And so, hindi siya totoong kailangang katakutan. Okay? And next, we have vitamins and mineral deficiency. And I think, no, may nagsabi pa na kung ano-ano daw na binibigay nating supplements sa naglo-low carb and fasting. Hindi lang kung ano-ano. Okay? But the person who will say kung ano-ano doesn't understand how low carb works. Okay? Because with low carb and fasting, we tend to eliminate everything. Wala na tayong capacity to hang on to electrolytes because of lowered glycogen. Yung glycogen kasi, storage form ng ating body when it comes to glucose, but also, it serves as a sponge. Para siyang sponge that hangs on to electrolytes. Mainly sodium, potassium, and to some extent, magnesium. Okay? That's why, kung hindi mo na ipaplano ng mabuti ang inyong pagkain and know that magnesium and potassium sources are somewhat limited, okay, when it comes to low carb food that are on the safe list, so you will really tend to have lesser of it. So pwede kang magkakaroon ng deficiency. And if you are doing low carb but still hindi mo pa nako-correct yung utak mo na you are still afraid of eating red meat, you are still afraid of salty foods, you are still afraid of eating too much protein. So, of course, magkakaroon ka talaga ng deficiency because why? You are left with eating only vegetables. And vegetables are good, but vegetables are not enough. Okay? You need to have adequate amount of proteins. And proteins from vegetables could be like mushrooms, beans, na konti lang yung low carb na beans. Marami sa mga beans are still high carb, starchy beans. And also, yung certain nuts and seeds. And they're good sources, but not everybody can tolerate nuts and seed. In fact, nakita natin sa mga patient na those who are eating nuts, seeds, and nuts on top of their usual low-carb meaty meals, sila yung mas may tendency na magkaroon ng elevated uric acid as compared to eating pure carnivore. Okay? But of course, iba-iba kada tao and depende kung ano yun na yung status ng health ninyo when you started. So, it's important pa din to just know these things and see if it's fit you. Pero at the end of the day, kailangan you have to know yourself and you know what to watch out for. And if in doubt, always have guidance sa mga nauna na mas naka-experience nito or yung iba na nauna nang naka-experience ng mga side effects na to and they've studied it well para hindi nyo na ito maranasan. They have their own tips and tricks para to go about this and to make this one sustainable. So vitamins and mineral deficiency will only occur if you are not eating the right foods, if you are not planning your meals, o yung araw-araw na kinakain mo ay itlog, lettuce, at cucumber lang. Okay, those are good. Pero kung yun lang kinakain mo 2 times a day, 3 times a day for the whole year, hindi yan enough. That's not enough. Okay? You have to cycle your meat. Kung ngayon, chicken, bukas pork, and then beef, and then you add more organ meats, you put in some eggs, tapos magsi-seafood ka rin paminsan-minsan, hindi kailangang mahal, kahit dilis lang, okay? Those are rich in in omega-3, o yung sardines, okay? Yung sardines are very cheap, no? Nakabili nga kami, 30 pesos lang, 1 kilo ng yung sardines na fresh, ha? Hindi yung delata, kasi yung mga delata, marami ng preservatives yan. So, you go to the talipapa, you go to the market and buy fish. Kahit ano, yung pinakamura, usually yun yung pinakamasustansya. Because those are small fishes that you can cook whole and you can eat whole. So, actually, yun yung pinaka-healthy. Because that is what is true nose to tail eating. Yung galing sa nguso hanggang sa buntot. Nose to tail eating is whole food eating when it comes to fish, and those are also has the lowest mercury content kasi nasa baba pa sila ng food chain, and those are your best option when it comes to protein sources and calcium sources. Kainin yung mga buto-buto ng fish when you can. So those are good sources of potassium. Make sure lang na hindi kayo matutusok, walang foreign body na mga matutusok sa inyong throat kasi pupunta yan sa mga ENT. Ayaw namin ng ganyang kaso kasi napakahirap hanapin yung mga fine bones ng bangus at kung ano-ano pa. Okay? So, be careful when you eat those. Okay? So, vitamins and mineral deficiency is actually not true. And of course, yung loss of consciousness, hindi rin yan totoo, especially if you are already adapted. Nagsisimula lang yan sa mga una, at kung meron man, those are mostly related to electrolyte loss. Okay? So, hindi ito supplement na kung ano-ano lang. It's really electrolyte supplementation with the necessary electrolyte that you need. But of course, we can understand na kung sino man ang magsasabi niyan is wala talagang alam when it comes to low carb because they have not experienced it themselves. Okay? So, but if they have experienced it and they know how it works and they were able to prepare what's necessary. Okay? Kasi nung unang panahon, we don't need to supplement. Kasi yung ating tubig, okay, it's coming from spring, is coming from lakes, and all very mineral rich. Okay? But ngayon, yung tubig natin, purified. Okay? Purified, distilled, pure H2O. Yes, malinis, but devoid of minerals. That's why ngayon, kailangan natin to actively make sure that we are eating or consuming mineral water by adding in some extra minerals in the form of salt, yung paborito natin, sodium chloride. We also have cream of tartar or potassium chloride powder as potassium source, a little Epsom salt or magnesium powder for magnesium. Those are important. Okay? So, yun. So, loss of consciousness is really not a very fearful thing. Okay? And yung, eto naman, insulin is essential. Yes, we agree. Insulin is essential. So, hindi natin pinapa-zero yung ating insulin, but we are avoiding insulin spike and make sure that every day we have a rest from insulin. So, that's why we usually, kung meron ka pang fats to lose, you can maintain at 18 hours of fasting. At kung hindi naman kaya, you can just have it at 16 hours. And make sure that you eat low-carb meals, okay? Rich in protein, because protein will induce insulin increase but on a stable level. So, it's good. It's stable yun. Kaya yung mga diabetics are better to eat proteins, especially at night. Hindi kailangan maraming-rami. Just isa sigurong chicken breast or isang buong isda. That's already enough proteins to stabilize your blood sugar overnight, because that way, that protein will not spike your blood sugar, but it will have a modest increase, just enough increase in your insulin to make sure it is balanced out. So, ganun kagaling yung katawan natin. Okay? So, Insulin is essential, it's good, it's true, but it's not a fear, no, na mawawala siya. For example, when we do low carb and fasting, we stimulate insulin when it is necessary. And eating enough proteins can make sure we have just enough baseline amount of insulin for us to still function well. And lastly, ulcer formation, yun yung pinakakatakutan ng iba, no? So, ulcer formation is not gonna happen if your body is not under inflammation. Stress ulcer, burning ulcer, meron pang, ano pa yun, brain damage na ulcer. Those are possibilities kung bakit nagkakaroon ng ulcer sa tiyan. And the ulcer formation is not just because of acid, but it's because of the nasirang lining, protective lining within the stomach that makes it vulnerable from your own acid. So, imagine niyo, I think meron kaming video niyan, kaya lang hindi pa natapos. So, imagine niyo, kung kakain ka ng bituka, sino kumakain dito ng mga bituka ng manok, bituka ng kung ano-ano, 'di ba? When you eat those are still the same as our bituka. But bakit na yung kinakain nating bituka natutunaw ng ating tiyan, pero yung tiyan mismo natin, yung bituka mismo natin, hindi siya natutunaw ng ating acid? It's because there is a protective layer in between. Okay? And the moment na ma-jeopardize, na masira yung protective layer na yon, dun na pwedeng makapasok yung acid at pwede niya nang kainin yung ating layer ng ating stomach, and that can lead into ulcer. So, not eating will actually not stimulate. It will not stimulate acid production. So, mawawala actually yan. So, yung iba, medyo kung sanay kang kumakain ng 6-7 in the morning, your body is so intelligent na magproproduce siya ng acid by that time. Pero, if you will not give in, say for example, magsa-start ka ng intermittent fasting mo, your body is so intelligent, it will stop acid production because alam niya na wala kang kinakain. Okay? And that is also more important for you to be very busy at huwag lang maghintay sa pagkainan kung kailan matatapos yung fasting ninyo to get your mind off it. Okay? Para mawala sa isip nyo yung pagkain. Because as long as you keep on thinking of food, no, yung tiyan nyo, all the more magsisikret yan. Meron tayong tinatawag na cephalic phase of digestion. Na naiisip mo pa lang, pwede nang mag-respond yung katawan mo. Just like kung mag-iisip ka ng hilaw na mangga and all that, pwede yung magkaroon ng salivary response and then gastric acid response. Okay? So, importante na you know that ulcer formation will not occur if your integrity ng inyong stomach lining is intact without inflammation. And the inflammatory foods that are doing that inflammation are the number 1, soft drinks, high fructose corn syrup, and mostly yung mga sugar and sweets. And hindi lang sugar and sweets, sobra sa kanin, sobra sa tinapay. Those are the common among Filipinos. So, ulcer formation, hindi yan mangyayari with low carb and fasting. But if ever you want to start, but meron na kayong ulcer to start with, you are a diagnosed of gastric ulcer or peptic ulcer, mas mabuti magpakonsulta muna because pwede naman niya mabigyan muna ng gamot until the ulcer will heal, and then you can start with your journey. But low carb alone, pwede po kayong mag-start anytime. Kahit may ulcer pa yan o wala. All the more that you need to start. And try to think, no, na yung low carb, actually, ano lang yan, descriptive name. But what we are eating, sabi nga ni Dr. Ken Berry, it's the proper human diet. PhD, it's the proper human diet. Kaya lang medyo hindi siya descriptive. So ano ba talaga yung proper human diet? Kaya natin nilagyan ng low carb kasi yung normal diet na nakasanayan natin is very, very high carb. And so, we want a low carb meal to emphasize, no? Contrary to the normal high carb diet. Okay? So, yun. I can see no that some are interested to join our masterclass. So, we have ongoing masterclass. I think hanggang next year pa to. So, but if you want to join earlier, much better para mas makilala ninyo ang iyong classmates and we can see each other on a weekly basis. Okay? Weekly talaga. Nagkikita kami ng mga masterclass para pag-usapan ang kahit anong bagay and usually mga bagay na hindi natin pwede basta-basta i-divulge in public because of course sa 300 of you who are usually watching live, no? So mas marami yung mga silent readers and silent watchers, and we don't want to send the wrong message, and we want for the more sensitive topics, of course, better if it's guided and it is more personalized. Kaya we have the exclusive group in our masterclass. Open na yung Diabetes Masterclass, Hypertension Masterclass, and Weight Loss Masterclass. And this coming Sunday, we will open the Fatty Liver Masterclass. So if you can join in as pre-reg rate, mas mabuti yun. Just message Alvin Chua Rojo or Angela Rojo for details. And yun po. So, the unfounded fears in low carb and fasting before I started ay wala na ngayon. That's why I'm advocating it, because all I can see with a properly done low carb and fasting are just benefits. So, benefits lang talaga. Wala nang fears, and these are just becoming benefits of healing, no? So, we will change this to benefits of low carb and fasting. So, all the opposite here are now the benefits of low carb. Okay? So, thank you so much, everybody. Maraming salamat. So, I'll see you again this coming Wednesday for another episode of What's Up Doc. I hope I will bring you a very amazing guest soon para may ibang tao naman kayong makita. Hindi lang yung pagmumukha natin. Maraming salamat po. Have a good day. Have a great week. And make sure to always stay low carb so that we will all stay safe. Goodbye. Thank you.